It sounds like in your current role, you have a lot of teams that are actually doing CRO and experimentation. What is there still to be built? What are the new things or the new challenges you're working on to build that culture of experimentation? And how are you currently using AI?
We're not allowed to use external tooling because of the sensitive data that we handle and also regulation. But we have our own custom GPT, our own VodafoneZiggo GPT that we can use. And if we look from the CRO Center of Excellence, we're also working hard on adding custom GPTs in there for experimentation. So how to formulate a good hypothesis, how to analyze test results, but also the thing stakeholders have the most difficulty with is they get the A/B test analysis with the key summary from the CRO specialist, but they want to understand it themselves too, right? So not just, the test won and it was a significant positive result, but especially if it's inconclusive. Okay, what does that mean? What are possible next steps? So we're working together with the AI team that's actually facilitating this on adding those modules so that we can actually make CRO more accessible inside the company.
Today we're here with Daniël Granja Baltazar, and he is currently working at VodafoneZiggo in the Netherlands in the business department, so B2B sales. And he's not only running experiments, but he's also creating personalized watches and selling them through his own Shopify store, which is really interesting and probably a great way to learn. Welcome, Daniël. Great to have you here.
Hi, welcome, Lisa. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, no worries. So can you tell us something about what does the experimentation program at VodafoneZiggo currently look like? So how many experiments do you run for your team, and maybe what does the bigger company do?
Yeah, so currently at VodafoneZiggo, we have quite a mature CRO program. So I think in total, we're now with 16 CRO specialists, and that's across 3 different brands. So we have Vodafone, which is in the B2C market, mostly mobile focused. In the B2B market, we also offer fixed internet, cybersecurity, and many more things. We have Ziggo, which is mostly fixed internet and TV and entertainment services. And then the last one, Hollands Nieuwe, which is like a budget consumer mobile brand. So all these CRO specialists are spread across all these different brands. And then you have B2C and B2B. And out of those 16, it's me and one other colleague that are on the B2B side. So a lot of the CRO efforts are on the B2C side, which is also not a coincidence, because if we look at the amount of volume in terms of users and visitors, B2C has way more visitors than the B2B part of the website. So experimentation in terms of A/B testing is mostly happening on the small business side of the B2B website. There we are running dozens of experiments in the whole company. If we look at the yearly scope, we're running like 300 experiments per year, user interviews. And if I look at the qualitative part, that's a really big chunk of the work for the SME and large segment.
And how are you connected to the more international brand of Vodafone, for example? Do you ever talk to people in other countries as well, or is it just the Netherlands?
Yeah, so at VodafoneZiggo, because we're like a joint venture, like 50% Vodafone owned and 50% Liberty Global owned, there are some collaborative projects that Vodafone Group does involve us together with other countries. But we're a little bit different compared to the other Vodafone countries because, there's this joint venture mix. So some things they're not allowed to share because of regulation reasons. And some projects, they do involve us. And I think in the projects that we get involved, actually the Netherlands has quite a good position, is seen as being on the forefront. So usually in those kind of projects, they do ask us for our input and even on guidance for those projects. So it doesn't happen on a weekly basis, but when it happens, it's always cool to see what's also happening across the Vodafone board.
No, I can imagine. If someone is listening to this episode, where can they potentially know you from? Like, where could they have seen you, or is there something you're exceptionally good at or talking about in the space?
Yeah, so they can see me on LinkedIn. Like that's a comment I usually get. Like, hey, I've seen some posts of you pop up on LinkedIn. Also, I'm always attending like conferences and events where I can learn more about experimentation and digital marketing. I think, what else? I've appeared on a couple of podcasts, and I'm really passionate about talking about experimentation, minimum viable products, MVPs, like start small and how to scale that up. And for me, I really want to break that barrier of, experimentation is A/B testing. because in my work, the qualitative research side of things is actually a really important part
And
to
that's
get to
due
the
to,
results.
is that due to the traffic constraints?
Big part due to the traffic constraints, but also if we look at the B2B segment, it's more complex than the B2C segment. So let's say somebody that's only going to buy a mobile phone, that journey is not that complex. Also, people kind of know what to expect because they've done it before. So it's basically different logo, but kind of similar flows that they used to also from competitors. However, for companies, it becomes way more complex depending on the scale and what kind of services they want. So I imagine if you have people employed, you need an internet connection, mobile devices, a VPN connection, cloud services. Yeah, then we're looking at a total package. So qualitative research is important to really understand, are we telling a easy to understand story? What kind of expectations do people have? And are we matching those expectations? And if not, where do we need to improve that?
And how does that tie together with your passion for MVPs? Can you explain a little bit about, I think you have some kind of a framework there as well, right?
That's correct. I started at VodafoneZiggo like 3.5 years ago. And at the time, especially on the B2B side of the business, a lot of stuff was like being built and just shipped. Also because people thought we don't have the big volume to A/B test. People are just building, shipping, saying, hey, this is MVP, and then basically never really look back at it. And I looked at that process and I said, hey guys, I think we can do this more efficiently. And people also agreed because no one really likes to put in quite a lot of energy during the quarter and then not really seeing the results or knowing that they delivered something that's not in the final stage. So I looked at that from a CRO point of view and said, hey, what if we think about a problem that we want to solve here? Start with hypothesis. So for the CRO people, quite familiar part of the process. But for people who are not in CRO, you really have to nail it down. Like, okay, what's the problem? How do we know this problem is real? So what kind of proof points do we have based on quantitative research, but also qualitative research? And if we know that problem, we're not going to think about a magical solution. This is the solution, we're going to build it. We're going to think about, okay, if we agree that this is the problem, what might possible solutions look like? And then basically test them, for example, as interactive prototypes in Figma and put them in front of entrepreneurs, in-depth interviews where we can see, okay, why does one score better than the other? And what kind of other nuances and feedback do we get from those entrepreneurs to further craft upon it? And then basically what happens is that the initial stage takes longer, right? So that's the part people are then not super enthusiastic about. But what they will see is that the feedback that they receive helps to deliver an MVP that's much better than the MVP that you would ship out if you had skipped all that previous work.
And do you have maybe a goal on this, that every quarter you want to run an MVP, or not necessarily?
No, not necessarily, because then it kind of becomes a gamified framework, like, okay, this is the amount of MVPs we want to deliver. But I do look, for example, at the SME and the large side of the B2B business, like what are the kind of problems we're working on and how could we validate this? So if an MVP is the way to do it, okay, let's sit down and discuss that process. If there's another way, if we can say, hey, there's enough demand for this product and service, let's just create, for example, a landing page, link a Google ad to it, and we try 2 different messaging angles, that could be an approach as well. So an MVP is not per se, we need to build something new. It's really about that mindset. What's the smallest thing we can do to validate, to get validated learnings, and to say we need to go left or we need to go right.
Do you ever use meta ads in order to pre-validate ideas as well?
We do use meta ads in B2B. I know on the B2C side, much bigger budgets for meta ads, but we do use them at B2B as well. What we do see is that, the type of behavior from people that come through meta ads versus people who come via Google ads or even organic search is very different. So people who use organic search, they're already way further down the process. They're already thinking about, okay, I need this product or service. What are the competitors that I'm going to compare next to each other? While people who are clicking on a Google ad, they're not that problem aware yet. They know there's a problem. They don't know what the right solution is yet. And if you look at social advertising, those people sometimes just click because they see something. They're like, hey, this might be interesting. And that might trigger their journey upon saying, hey, I need to research this further.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. No, I was asking because sometimes you can already do a little MVP in 2 versions of meta ads, for example. And some companies do that, but if you don't, that's also totally fine.
We had an interesting experiment last year where I looked at the data for a product page. It was around cloud telephony. So in the past, we had these old phone centers that were physical. Nowadays, luckily, it's in the cloud. And a lot of companies are looking for that software, right? Like my finance department needs to have a phone number, the marketing department, sales, etc. But it's quite a complex product to understand. Like, what does it offer really? What are the features? How does it work? If I buy it from you guys, what does the process look like? So I looked at the data, which parts of the page people were seeing and weren't seeing. I was looking at the qualitative side. What did people fill in an opinion survey as feedback, and also what were they looking for in search engines and chatbots. And then I did an analysis of that and put marketing and sales into one room to go over it and say, hey, these are the findings. Basically, the page was too long, missing some really key questions. And then sales was actually laughing because I asked them like, hey, you guys talk to these potential customers on a daily basis. And what sales saw is that the main questions they have in these sales calls, what is VoIP, voice over IP, so calling through internet, how much does it cost, how does implementation work? All these questions were also the most searched for questions online.
Right.
And then sales provided us with really good input on how to answer those questions. So then marketing and the content editor sat down to rewrite that page, to rewrite the Google ads. And once we did that, we saw the number of leads really go up.
Yeah, so that's how you used actually knowledge that was already inside the company, but for your online pages. And
it's funny because I applied that method and then also shared that in a weekly B2B marketing meeting. And because people remember the product, it was, we call it OneNet. That's the name of the Vodafone Business cloud telephony solution. Doesn't really fit yet.
Oh, makes sense. And I'm just wondering about how you got to the world of experimentation. Like, what was your first A/B test? Do you remember that?
My first A/B test. Yeah, actually, funny enough, I didn't get through the world of experimentation through digital marketing or CRO.
Okay.
I got there through recruitment. And let me elaborate. Like, actually, my first job after I graduated from my bachelor degree was working as a recruiter at a recruitment agency that approached me through LinkedIn. I was like, whoa, the job market is insanely easy. You know, I just get offered a job on a silver plate. Spoiler alert, if people approach you without experience, it means the job is pretty tough. For this job, it meant that I had to do a lot of cold calling to see if we could fit the candidates that we have to the positions that, in this case, these food companies had. I had done some sales jobs during my period as a student, but not really the cold calling kind of jobs, like the sales jobs on the streets, you know? So this was totally different. During the first 2 weeks of training, they taught us how to actually ask a lot of good questions. So people think about sales like, oh, it's Wolf of Wall Street. You say recruiter in suit and tie. They even see Wolf of Wall Street more in the back of their minds. But it was actually about interviewing. And I did a job for a little over a year, decided I want to move back into the digital marketing, data and CRO space. And then the first agency that I saw in Rotterdam, Zicht Online, which had a number of cool clients like cultural institutions, education, museums. I pretend to be that recruiter, phoned them up, asked to be transferred to Seb, the founder.
Okay.
And he got me on the phone. He was like, who are you? I was like, well, you don't know me yet. And I basically pitched myself.
Wow.
And then he said, well, just come on over next week because then my founder, Paul, and I can sit down because we don't have a vacancy yet, but we might have something interesting.
Okay.
And then the deal was, we will invest in your marketing knowledge as a marketing consultant if you also help us bring new business in. So then I started as a marketing consultant at this small digital agency where some of the clients I brought in, I actually also helped service, which was really valuable.
You would say your first experiment was that calling or calling the...
Yeah, the first experiment was that recruitment job. I think the first real experiment in terms of like the A/B test that I set up was when I was working at Zicht Online and I stumbled upon Google Optimize, RIB. And I saw some videos and some articles explaining how it worked. And we had one museum as a client, Krullenmuller Museum in the Veluwe, really nice location. They had kind of an internal debate about expositions. There was like the marketing department, they wanted short and nice looking pages. There were the museum curators, they wanted to tell the whole life story on those pages, basically making them quite long. And during that meeting I said, well, we can also A/B test this with Google Optimize for free. And then we can see if people prefer a shorter page with just a video trailer on them, basically like cinemas do with new movies, or a longer page with more photos, more text to really go in depth. And I remember after that meeting, I just got a call from the marketing manager from that museum saying, can we schedule another call to talk more about Google Optimize? Because I want to know what it is, how A/B testing works. I didn't know too much about it, so I had to do a deep dive. And then explained how we could set up the test. And spoiler, we sold 7 times more tickets on that shorter page variant with the trailer. So people were spending half of the time on that page, but they were watching that video trailer, while on the longer page, that trailer was mostly being skipped. And people were buying the ticket. And also the feedback afterwards were that people said, yeah, that page really enticed me to want to visit it, instead of the other page where too much information was being given away, which is also what the museum goer is not really looking for, because there needs to be an element of surprise there. You don't want to see it all online. And that really created a new conversation at that client, where the museum curators and the marketing department started to think together about new experiments instead of seeing each other as enemies inside the same organization.
And in your current role, do you still need to build on that mindset of experimentation? Like in the past, it was all discovery and like, wow, this is new, how does it work? But it sounds like in your current role, you have a lot of teams that are actually doing CRO and experimentation. What is there still to be built? What are the new things or the new challenges you're working on to build that culture of experimentation?
Yeah, good question. So I think there's 2 elements to that. The first one is if we talk about the sheer number of CRO people we have, 16, people are like, that's huge, you know? The whole company has 8,000 people. So as you can imagine, there's still a lot of teams that don't have a CRO specialist working in them. So those teams do sometimes reach out to see if we can help them on a more ad hoc basis. We also try to more train the teams and give them frameworks so they understand how to also do some of that CRO work themselves, because that way we can still be involved, but we don't need to do as much hands-on. And then the second thing, if I look at the B2B side where I'm working, there's a really big shift there, where in the past we said Vodafone Business wants to be a telco provider. So it's all about the mobile phones and fixed internet connectivity. That's our bread and butter. That's still the case. However, we're now also moving into the IT services space, because there's simply more and more demand out of the market. Companies need cloud services, cloud telephony, all these different kind of things. And that means, okay, this is a new part of the business. How do we, we have some services there, but how do we scale those up? And also, how do we decide which new products and services to onboard? In the past, we would just onboard them and see if it works. Well, we've made that mistake quite a few times. So now we're more looking to an MVP mindset. How can we try out in the smallest possible way whether there's demand? If there's demand, we go for it. If there's no demand or not enough, we park it.
Interesting. And how are you currently using AI?
Currently using AI. I knew this question was coming.
Yeah, it's standard procedure now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not allowed to use external tooling because of the sensitive data that we handle and also regulation. But we have our own custom GPT, our own VodafoneZiggo GPT that we can use. And if we look from the CRO Center of Excellence, we're also working hard on adding custom GPTs in there for experimentation. So how to formulate a good hypothesis, how to analyze test results. But also the thing stakeholders have the most difficulty with is they get the A/B test analysis with the key summary from the CRO specialist. But they want to understand it themselves too, right? So not just, the test won and it was a significant positive result, but especially if it's inconclusive. Okay, what does that mean? What are possible next steps? So we're working together with the AI team that's actually facilitating this on adding those modules so that we can actually make CRO more accessible inside the company.
Oh, that's really amazing. And will it also ever contain like all the findings of experiments? Like would a product owner be able to say like, hey, did we ever test this in the past and what was the outcome?
That's a project that a colleague of mine, Floris, is currently working on. We have Airtable, where all the A/B tests are in. But as you can imagine, that's becoming quite a big library. So also for new colleagues, first time you open that, you almost get a panic attack. It's like, there's
It's
hundreds.
300 tests a year for
Yeah.
10 years, something like that.
No, we implemented Airtable in 2020. I don't know what we had before that. So basically from 2020 until now, yeah, there's thousands of tests in there, which makes it really hard to find if something was tested before. So Flourish is working on seeing how we can add like an AI chat on top of Airtable. So we can simply ask questions and not only see if something was tested before, but a question we also get a lot is, oh yeah, remember we run a test a while ago on a PDP or the checkout. I don't recall which one it was. And that way stakeholders can just ask it to the chatbot and then it will show up the relevant tests. And also for us as a CRO Center of Excellence, we do see each other's work. We also review each other's work, but there's a lot of tests happening. So you also forget after a while. And this way, it also makes it easier for us to see, okay, what did my other colleagues test on this particular topic? Hey, that's actually a useful ID, which I could use for similar kind of project.
And how does that review process work? Because you say that you review maybe test plans or setups before you run an experiment, or is it post-test analysis that you kind of quality check? What is that check?
You mean the checks that a CRO specialist does, or how we review each other's work?
What I understand is you're currently reviewing each other's work. So another CRO specialist might review your work. What is that about the setup? Is that about the post-test analysis? How does that work?
Yeah, it's more about like the 4I principle. So instead of just having the CRO specialist set up the test, run it, afterwards analyze it, and share that report with the stakeholders, we do want an extra CRO person to always double check. So you can actually see, hey, does the test indeed look the way it's supposed to look? Nothing weird happening in the code. Also after the test is running, nothing weird happening in the data. And afterwards with the A/B test analysis, one specialist wrote it, another one reviews it, can give some feedback or some last remarks. And then basically that's implemented and then shared with the stakeholders. That way, no human errors are happening, because especially when deadlines are tight and there's a lot of stuff happening at the same time, you can easily forget something. So yeah, you forget something in the targeting, or you forget something in the date range in which the test should run, or you forget to exclude certain segments. So that way, by having someone else check, for sure, like, this thing I missed this time. Okay, check.
And is that then someone also in the business side of things or the B2C side? Like that can be...
No, CRO people just chat each other stuff. Yeah, preferably it's like from the same brand in the same branch, because then it's easier. You already have all the context. But let's say a B2B test is running, I go, or like my colleague that's in B2B goes on holiday, I can also just share it with the B2C colleagues and somebody else reviews it. So it's not per se the case, but it's preferable to have someone that already has that context, because then you know for sure that they're looking at the right thing.
And is that a manual process, or that you send each other like, hey, this test is ready, can you have a look? Or do you have like certain triggers or certain statuses in your process that help you guide this Q&A?
It's a manual process. So we have a Teams channel specifically for CRO, where all the CRO specialists are in. And then there's one sub channel in there called request for feedback. That's where all the A/B test analysis are. There's also another one called test development puzzles, when people get stuck with writing the code for A/B test. Something's not 100% working yet. You can share it in there and other people can comment on it. So it's a manual process, but I think in this case, it's also good that it's a manual process, because it allows us to collectively learn. I also look at the test development puzzles, and sometimes they're not relevant for me, but I do want to understand, wait, what's actually broken here and how did they solve it, because maybe further down the line I might need that in one of my tests.
Oh, that's smart. And how did your personal Shopify store help you in any way to learn something about experimentation?
Yeah, that was a bit of a hobby that got out of hand. Like I started modifying watches first for myself like 5 or 6 years ago. And then I had some friends, colleagues, former colleagues, family members be like, hey, that looks cool. You did that? Like, can you change one of my watches? And then I was doing that. And then at one point they were bringing in other people. Then I built some customized watches for some people close to me. And they had people who had seen the watch and they were like, hey, where can I buy it? I was like, well, it's not really a business. But then I started out with social media. I thought, okay, if I have Instagram and Facebook where I can just showcase my work, I'm all set and people can just pay via PayPal. I can update the tracking number in there and we're good to go. But yeah, that was my assumption. Reality was that 80% of the people I talked to were saying, wow, nice. I really would love to order this, but through a website, because that's just easier with the confirmation email and the whole process. So I looked a few times at Shopify, and then they retargeted me with this special deal, like €1 a month for the first 3 months. I was like, okay, that's too cheap, like let's just try it. So I spent a week making the Shopify website, put it live, basically went to bed, didn't think about it. Next morning I woke up, I saw a Shopify notification about an order. I was like, is somebody trying to scam me? And I opened it and I saw it was an order from a guy in Germany.
Right.
Didn't know his name, checked him on Instagram, Facebook, none of the people I was in contact with. But he had provided me with his address details, email address, and his phone number.
And he had paid.
And he had paid. And I remember calling the guy and asking him like, hey, is it correct that you placed an order on my website, uniquewatchmods.nl? And the guy was like totally confused. He was like, yes, you are the guy who's making the watches, right? I was like, yeah, no, I just want to double check. So then I pretend I was like, yeah, there were some issues with Shopify, so I just want to double check. And I just told him like, yeah, just know I'm going to order all the parts. It's going to take 2 to 3 weeks. And once the last part is in, I'll send you a message and I'll give you the delivery date when I'll hand over the watch to DHL. And then from there were a couple of other assumptions I had. You don't want to put too much information on a product detail page, so I kept it really short. Found out some crucial information was missing, all kinds of dimensions, like how big is the watch, the strap, etc. I was like, okay, needs to be in there. At the beginning, I didn't want to offer certain payment methods like credit card and Klarna, because those are also being used by people who try to scam you. They then receive the item and say they didn't receive it or that it's defective. But I noticed that quite some people I was in contact with that were seriously interested. They said, well, yeah, I do want that option because otherwise I need to take a big chunk out of my salary and that way I can spread it over 2 months. So then I added those payment methods. I didn't think that I needed Trustpilot, so I had Judge Me at the beginning for reviews on my Shopify website, also because they have a really easy free plugin. But then several people told me like, what the hell is Judge Me? I don't know that company, is that a thing? Are those reviews legit? So then I create Trustpilot profile and just do an email outreach afterwards, asking people to help a small business owner by writing down a review. Yeah, and those things just show, right? Like even though as a CRO specialist, you're an expert, you don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And we actually also do have a lot of assumptions about what's going to work. And then in reality, some things match, but a lot of things don't. So the watch business was a really humble experience in that way. Like you don't know it all, just keep testing.
And you're still selling watches, right?
Yeah, I'm still doing that. So
are you doing a couple a month or are you doing like thousands a month? Probably
no, not thousands. No. I'm doing a couple. So it's just something I do next to my full-time job at VodafoneZiggo. So I also want to keep it fun. If I would have those kind of order numbers, then I would literally have to make a decision. But I think I also don't want it to be that big, because then it's not a hobby anymore. It's not a passion project. Then it actually becomes a job. And I think that would take some of the fun away that I currently have.
Definitely. And this is actually the final question, but is there anything we haven't touched upon yet that you would like to speak about?
Yeah, I would just say regarding the MVP framework and how to use CRO, I'm actually going to post in the coming weeks something about it, because I did this session at the Webwinkel Vakdagen with I think about like 20-25 entrepreneurs sitting at the table. And what was really funny is that these entrepreneurs, different company sizes, different industries, they were all making the same mistake as also Vodafone Business was doing. Is they're really already thinking about the solution. Why you should be focusing on the problem. What's the problem? Which evidence supports that this is a real problem? And then move from there. Don't think about the solution yet. Think about possible solutions that might solve that problem and then move forward. And there was a takeaway that I hadn't really expected, that everyone would be in that corner. But also the entrepreneurs after that session walked up to me and said, well, I was already falling in love with the solution, while this workshop actually showed me I have to go a bit back to the drawing board and really strongly define the problem. So that would be my final message, whatever you work on, what's the actual problem that you're solving, what kind of proof is out there in terms of data, qualitative feedback that this is a real problem and not just your passion project that you want to work on that you really fall in love with, but there's actually not really market demand for it.
Wow, Daniel, thanks so much for sharing this knowledge and wisdom with us. It was great to have you on the podcast, and I'll link to the post that you're making about the framework, and that way people can also find your LinkedIn profile. But thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Alicia, and have a nice weekend in advance. Cheers.